when you add self-medication, on top of potentially some post-traumatic stress or more grief and injury, or a traumatic brain injury, you add alcohol or drugs to that, it's pretty obvious what's going to happen. Obviously nothing productive. And that's where I see everyone, that's transitioning out, has a degree of that, but a lot of people has tools in the toolbox, and they have good support groups, and they have family, and not just everybody has that.
This is the Don't Hide the Scars podcast, presented by Pain, Parents and Addicts in Need.
Welcoming to the Don't Hide the Scars podcast. He's a veteran of the United States Army, over 20 years of service, Warrior's Heart founder, and a gentleman I just have the utmost respect for, Mr. Tom Spooner. Good to see you, sir.
Man, good to see you again also. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. Well, this podcast people haven't heard from you, so,
Right on.
It's great to speak with you. We recently started our Veterans in Need program that we're going to be providing some sober housing for veterans. Awesome. We're just seeing here in Fresno, California, an abundance of work that we do with the VA that, homeless, still very much out there struggling, with mental health issues, in addition to, substance use, abuse, addiction, whatever you would like to call it, on top of oftentimes some physical health issues. I mean,
yeah, man.
You know this better than anything with what you folks are doing at Warrior's Heart. I mean, what really, you have your own story of recovery. What really do we want to help people understand that are some of the primary things that veterans are facing when they're coming out of the service? Not all, but more than it should. The number should be zero that we allow to struggle, but that's not the case. What are you seeing with these men and women?
Well, predominantly, we see that they're not prepared. So the context of the military really holds everything together. And if you just look at it, a lot of the folks that join the military and are very successful in the military, they usually come from not the greatest of places, and the military provides that purpose, that context, the structure that is needed for any kind of good living. So to answer your question of with folks coming out, the first thing that happens is that structure is gone. You know what I mean? When I was in the military, I didn't have to think about what I was wearing. I didn't have to think about when I was eating. They told me when to go to the doctor. All of these different things were done for me, So when you remove that context, now I have to do it on my own, which requires a lot of self-discipline. And a lot of people, including myself, that has to be a learned skill, so even just coming out of that context, being kind of lost, a lot of times there's an identity crisis, because I no longer am wearing a uniform anymore. I no longer have purpose. I no longer have a mission, so ideally, you switch to the next chapter of your life, you reinvent yourself, and you get yourself another mission and another purpose of why you get up in the morning and get through the day. And that's where I see where folks have issues, right? Because if everybody could do that, we just would do it, but obviously there's problem. And then when you add self-medication, on top of potentially some post-traumatic stress or more grief and injury, or a traumatic brain injury, you add alcohol or drugs to that, it's pretty obvious what's going to happen. Obviously nothing productive is going to, and that's where I see everyone, that's transitioning out, has a degree of that, but a lot of people has tools in the toolbox, and they have good support groups, and they have family, and not just everybody has that. So that's kind of, if I had to generalize it, is getting out, not having the discipline, needing to reinvent themselves, and needing to get a new purpose in their life is predominantly the overarching struggles.
Well, and I would only imagine that maybe that becomes a bit more amplified for those, as you said. I mean, I've had several cousins, uncles that, went into the military, did create a better life for themselves, but once they were out, they did their 20 plus years.
Yeah.
They went right back to the environment essentially that they grew up in, which wasn't necessarily the most positive of situations. So
Right.
you come out, especially what, and you know this all too well, but folks that I know that did serve in any sort of combat situation,
Right.
it can extra amplify. I mean, I have a gentleman that I love and adore who's doing great now, but not long after he had come back from serving in the Middle East, one night, him and his wife, they're coming home from a concert, and
Hmm.
he's two lanes each way, and he's driving down the middle of it over the lane
Right.
separator. And his wife's, "Are you okay?" And he's like, "Oh my God, I reverted back to when I was driving a Humvee, and we had to drive down the middle of the road to avoid the landmines." And
Yep.
it's some of these things that people don't understand the varying degrees of what
Right.
PTSD can entail.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's a lot. It's obviously a very, like a kind of a combat tour, let's just say it, your average combat tour. Um, you basically live a lifetime. And what I mean by that is like, most of the times in life, even when it comes to loss, right? You lose your mother, your father, brother, I mean, you lose significant losses, in a lifetime where in one deployment, just on the loss side of the house, I mean, you may lose two or three buddies, you know what I mean, that were family members, the same kind of measure of loss to it, just within a 3 months to 1 year time period. So just on the grief side of the house, and then like you said, being in that surreal environment, in a combat environment where, things aren't the same. It's all the emotions attached to it, all the uh, moral grief and injury that occurs from just being in a war zone, you know what I mean, which is you know, inherently inhumane, right? I mean, it's war where people are trying to kill other people, which, okay, that's not normal. So, so with all of that stuff going on, like you said, it just makes sense that folks, whenever you come out of that environment and now you're back into taking kids to school and no one's trying to kill you and no, you're not trying to kill, what I mean? There's an adjustment period to that, and some folks adjust very well, like they have the tools and the abilities to do it, and some folks don't, yeah, because like you said, when it comes to trauma, trauma is trauma. I mean, you can't compare traumas. My bad day is my bad day. It may not compare to your bad day. Nonetheless, it was a really bad day for me.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I was reading a book not that long ago called "The Body Keeps a Score" that
Oh
was
yeah, I
all
love
about,
that book.
yeah, just so fascinating in how our body reacts. And one of the most poignant things was where, talking about like the deer that maybe falls, it gets up, it shakes it off, and it moves on. And the way that we work as humans in our brain, as you well know,
Right.
so much different. And I can only imagine the challenges if you would speak to this of say it's I had a friend who he was in charge of $180 million planes and arming
Hmm.
them and all these different. Then he comes back to the world and essentially gets kind of told, well, I mean, if you want to make lattes for people or whatever, it's like, how do you make that switch? I can't imagine, or somebody that is in charge of heavy artillery or whatever it is, to in a healthy way make that transition and switch. Like you said,
Yeah.
to all of a sudden showing up and expected to get in the minivan, get the kids off to school at 7:15 and make the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. It's a big switch for everything that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, man, the first part of that is for me, and a lot of times, I use myself because you can argue with my opinion, but you can't argue with my experience.
Right.
So for me, it was I had to really kind of process and come to the realization and the truth that there's nothing that I'm gonna do um, in the civilian world that is going to even come close to what I did in the military. You know,
Mm.
like you said, whether someone working with multi-million dollar things that's now a barista, you know what I'm saying? Like there's a, and then someone being in, you know, highly adrenaline, you know, combat zone, you know, all of that kind of stuff. Um, you know, that was the first thing for me is just realizing that, man, there's nothing that's going to exchange one for one with that, right? But um, that's where a lot of the symptoms come out, you know, of the risky behavior, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Of the, you know, a lot of the symptoms of something that's going on emotionally, you know, where I'm sabotaging my life. It's almost like I'm trying to create the level of chaos, you know, because it doesn't exist and I'm very comfortable in that. Well, then it's not here right now. Well, I can create some, you know, which is very self-defeating and not a good way to live. But just the realization that it's like I can't really compare, you know, what I'm doing now
Mm.
um, to what I did then. But I'm the one, and I learned this, is that I am the one that assigns value to my life. Um,
Ah,
you know what I'm saying? And it's
yeah.
super important that I'm the one that's in charge of that because if not, then you're going to tell me if my life is valuable or not. You know, whether that's being a barista, which I equate great value into doing that, you know, versus so that was another learned skill through all the therapies and everything that I went to is that hey, my life and what I'm doing right now, uh, the level of importance is up to me. Um, because what I do, some people think is not very important at all, you know, and that's wonderful, you know, and then other people think it's really
Right.
great. You know, the big thing is that I assign meaning to everything in my life or not, you know,
Yeah.
and that's not a good place to be in, you know, when you're feeling you're not living your potential, you know, mean nothing's like it ever was, you know, but it's got to be that clear cut transition. And I'm sure you've seen this with a lot of veterans they kind of got one foot in the past and one foot here. You know what I mean? They're watching all the war stuff, doing all those things, and then not there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I enjoy, you know what I mean, visiting those times of my life also, but it's also very important to me. It's like, hey, that, you know, I'm not going to do that again. You know,
Right.
I could, I mean, I could go into contracting and I could do all these other things, but that portion, that chapter of my life, you know, is over now. And now I need to be very focused on what this chapter of my life is. And for me, that's with my family, you know, my work at Warriors Heart, you know, and then trying to help our population, you know, with all the struggles that y'all are tackling, you know, I mean, with the veteran homelessness, the suicide, the chemical dependencies, the mental health. It's a lot. There's a lot of
Yeah.
work that we need to do.
I wanted to start this program because many months ago I was dealing with some veterans. I just didn't like the way they were being treated. I didn't like the services that were being provided, for the lack of a better term. I think we need to do a better job with our veterans, and in essence, that's why I decided to start this.
And I try to again stay in my faith and be grateful to God to be aware of it and to be able to do it, but it does get daunting and it's
Yeah.
taxing and all the things that you know. But I do want to have would like to ask you to share because you are an example of someone you did struggle with alcoholism
Right.
and did get on the other side of it. And how did if you could share how important sobriety, the support system. I know your loving wife
Right.
there with you, your family, um, to really being able to go from being a service member to now being of service to service members.
Right. Yeah, I like the way that sounds of service to service members, man. I like that. That's got meaning to me. So yeah, for me, I did a 21 years in the military from 1990 to 2011. A significant thing for me after 2 years in the military, I struggled with alcoholism as a young age. You know, my father was an alcoholic, my grandfather was an alcoholic. You know, that whole family tradition thing, and so I was fortunate enough, you know, events occurred in my life that got me to my bottom, which wasn't externally because professionally I was doing great. Personally, I was a freaking train wreck, and so I got sober. Not that easy as it sounds, right? I mean, and I couldn't do it on my own. For me, and my path was going to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I got a sponsor and went to meetings and followed the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and went through the steps, the 12 steps. And that was the game changer for me. Getting a power greater than myself in my life, and then helping others, the whole trust in God, clean house, help others, and so that was then the rest of my 19 years in the military uh, was all sober, and I still sponsored guys. I had a sponsor, just getting after it my whole time while I was on active duty. So what that gave me was, um, the ability to operate at my maximum capacity. I was not hindered by anything. And then for me, like you said, going through those struggles, just getting sober and then staying sober, you know what I mean, was a big deal. But I had a family because of that. I mean, to your question about sobriety, everything that I have in my life is a 100 direct results of me being sober. Like without, I mean, period, end of story. You know what I mean? If I take a drink or a drug, I'm out of the game. I've made horrible mistakes in sobriety, and that really hurts. It's one thing when you make mistakes and you're like, oh, I was drunk, you know what I mean? But it's another one where it's like,
Right.
whoa, I just really did that, and but yeah, so I mean, family, I have my sons, what I mean, my family unit, and but when I first got sober, my wife and I were separated, so I was single, what I mean. Which was a great thing, man, because I had to do it for me, and I had to be sober. I had to learn how to do it, and fortunate for me, I got my wife back, and was able to have a family afterwards and an incredible military career. So, so I didn't have to struggle with the chemical dependency aspects, I mean, of war. So then, post 9/11, I mean, I was in the Gulf War, and then post 9/11, I ended up doing 40 months total time of combat, at a pretty elite unit. So so I got some traumatic brain injury from that, and then a lot of moral grief and injury from that, and some post-traumatic stress, so I experienced all the things that normal human beings, when I say normal, meaning you're not a sociopath or a psychopath, right?
Right.
Key
Right.
difference. Any human being that experiences war, it changes you forever. And like you said, some folks, can process and don't need external help, which is great. And then other folks need it. Like for me, I had to be in a TBI, traumatic brain injury clinic for 3 months to help my cognition and get everything back on track. And then I had to do a lot of therapy, talk therapy, art there, all kinds of different therapies, to work on my I just call it unprocessed emotion, because you can
Sure.
call it post-traumatic stress, you can call it moral grief and injury, survivor's guilt, they got a bunch of names for it, but really what it boils down to is I have all these emotions, like you mentioned, body keeps the score, right? So I have all these emotions inside of me that for me, I needed professional help, someone with a license, PhD, to be, I mean, to help me process through what was going on. I even had to get on Zoloft. I even had to get on meds for, about 9 months because I had a chemical imbalance during those times, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the cool thing about all those therapies and all that stuff is it works. Uh, because if I would have added alcohol to my traumatic brain injury and all that unprocessed trauma, 100% I would have been one of the 22 a day that kills themselves, right? Because I wasn't thinking straight with my TBI, and then we know how that impairs brain function anyway. So, we know it wouldn't have made it. But like to your point, I was really set up for success. I mean, or I did the work that put me in the position for it, and obviously God's grace, being
Yeah.
the whole deal is,
Yes, sir.
but I had a family, what I mean, that was super supportive. I had a wife, I had when I got out of the military, I already had my purpose there in front of me, and I separated from the military. I accepted that I was done with that chapter of my life. And now my family became my team. Before the army came before my family, that's just the truth, because if the army asked me to do something, I didn't really have a choice, and so now my purpose, you know what I mean, is to stay sober and help other alcoholics and addicts to achieve sobriety, and then my family, can actually come first in my life nowadays. And then my loyalty chain, right over them, is all the folks that need recovery, and I was just afforded yet again another blessing with my partners at Warriors Heart, Josh and Lisa Lannon, me and my wife Lori, that this is my full-time job. You know what I mean? Is I'm like, no kidding, living the dream. If you gave me, Tom, here's $500 million, what would I do with my life? I would do exactly what I'm doing now. Now, don't get me wrong, I buy a lot of cool stuff, but I mean, I'm truly living the dream, man. I'm my passion and my profession, just like in the military, because that was both. I was passion and profession. And then now, passion and profession, I have a new purpose and new mission, but it's really the same one for me, right? I'm built to serve, so I need to continue to serve, so like you said, I mean, now I serve those that serve, from active duty to homeless veterans to law enforcement to EMTs, firefighters. It's being able to serve the folks that keep us protected and solve our problems for us in our times of, I mean, the house is on fire, I mean, someone's breaking in, I mean, the people that really take care of us, to be able to serve that population, man, is just an honor and a blessing to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, and I'm so glad that, there is, as it should be, we do focus definitely on our veterans, but we oftentimes, forget the domestic servants. Flint, who unfortunately wasn't able to make it because he's being of service to a family today,
Nice.
to sit and have this. So we'll definitely, he's like, please let Tom know we want to talk to him again soon.
Of course.
But Flint was an EMT, and we were sitting and talking one time, and I think, I mean, you've done AA.
Yeah.
Some of us in recovery meetings, we can have a dark sense of humor about the things we've been through. And he shared some situations that he had to face, and he went, if I wasn't able to kind of process I'm trying to be remember his exact wording, but just the things that can happen in this lifetime that we're not made to just see constantly,
Yes,
as you
man.
experienced as a human. I think you know where I'm going, that can create those traumas, that it was important for him, but it was a big part of his addiction too. And we forget that.
Absolutely.
I can't
Man.
imagine an EMT, a firefighter, a police officer that has to respond to something, especially if there's harm to a child, or goodness
Oh,
forbid, a death to a child, all these horrible things that unfortunately do go on.
yeah, every day.
Yeah, that ability to be able to respond and process, as you were talking about, that even that, you said a term that hit me recently. Somebody that I knew all their life, unfortunately, drank themselves to death. This was
Mm.
very recent, and I went through a period where, the little lady was asking me, "Are you okay?" And I said, I'm feeling some survivor's guilt.
Yeah,
I
of
put
course.
myself in situations in my alcoholism where literally a car accident, and guy goes, boy, who was in this accident? My condolences. I go, it was me. And he's looking at me like, you're
How did you
standing, you're
live through
fine.
that? Yeah.
Yeah. So I can't imagine that with service members and first responders.
Man, I got just a quick question. Do you have any intel and stuff on Suboxone use?
Flint really would,
Okay.
because like I said, he has a treatment center as well. We're both pretty anti long-term harm
Yes.
reduction. Yeah, I actually did speak with a young lady who, God, was this a week and a half ago? said she had been on it for 2 years after coming out of treatment, recently lost two of her front teeth.
Yeah.
It's still an opioid, and
I know, man. That's where, and I was just, it was just one of the things I love asking people's experience about because I haven't, I mean, we use it in detox, it's designed to step down, to taper down, and it works beautifully for that. It was never meant for long term. It's basically the government has turned it into the new methadone clinics, kind of deal. But anyway, whole nother topic. Sorry, it was on my mind.
no, absolutely. And I'd be more than happy to connect Flint with you somehow to really talk that and maybe even have another conversation down the line. Because, yeah, it's one of our big concerns that we see where it's,
Okay. Y'all are seeing it too.
yeah, I mean, you think about it, and we had a gentleman here that was on it for quite a while. Told the doctor basically go shove it, and he just kind of went cold turkey, which you definitely don't recommend. But he was like,
Right.
he was like, I was leaving the house, and when I couldn't get a hold of my doctor, here I am going into another panic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we've seen that. We've heard people where they haven't been able to get in. What do? They ended up going back out to the streets. And I mean, after what you would consider a year and a half or two of sobriety
Yeah.
otherwise. So, we're a big no chinks in the armor,
Gotcha, man.
message.
Sweet.
That's just who we are. It's
Yeah,
like,
man.
why?
Same here.
Why? Especially with young kids, but
New Perceptions North, the premier drug and alcohol treatment and recovery center in Central California. A full continuum of medically supervised top quality care with programs for detox and patient residential treatment with dual diagnosis, intensive outpatient treatment, sober living support groups, and more. New Perceptions North provides adult men and women with the highest caliber of professional health care, treating each client with compassion and respect in a safe, comfortable environment to begin the process of recovery to proudly create and sustain a life without addiction. Call 559-978-1507 or visit newperceptionsnorth.com.
So we all need the same kind of solutions, right? No matter what my job description is, if I'm an alcoholic or addict, like, hey, we all got to get sober. But we know that the power of the peer network, right? There's no pressure like peer pressure, right? So when you can get like-minded folks and shared experience kind of folks together, then you can make progress just much faster. It can be done with any of us, you know what I mean? Like if you're an alcoholic or an addict, I can relate. I don't care what your profession is, right? But then if you add the profession to it, then it's just more things that we have in common and can talk about. And the biggest thing with folks, like you said, that have volunteered to be in this positions to receive that trauma, right? The approaches to healing are much different, right? Because I'm not a victim to it. Meaning that wasn't done to me. Even though if it was done to me, I have volunteered to put myself in that position for it being done to me. So the approaches for treatment are very, very different, even though the treatment is the same. So if you approach me like, Tom, it's okay, you were a victim, like that's not going to happen any further, unless we're talking about
right.
childhood stuff or whatever,
Sure.
what I mean? And but not as an adult. But if you approach to me as a volunteer, now I can work with that, and so it's just the different approaches to the same end goal, of processing trauma. But that's where a lot of our first responders, our military members, that's why they don't do well in regular kind of therapies that are set up to treat victims.
Right.
Because, to treat a victim, that you must come to them in the approach of like, oh my gosh, this happened to you, let's process through it. So it's all the same thing, but the dynamics are very different on the approaches, and that's what I know is it's just it's like nonlinear when we can get all those different pieces kind of together, the growth, you know what I mean, that we can get from that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And would you be willing to speak on from your experience? Is
Uh,
it tougher for servicemen and women and first responders to ask for that help because they are so I mean, you are literally trained to be the help.
Exactly.
I've seen some of the mission footage that
Yeah.
you've done. I'm very familiar with what publicly we can know about your
Right.
career.
Yeah.
Uh, it would just seem so hard to me for that, you know,
Yeah.
population to ask for that help.
Yes. So with my experience, two pieces of that. I actually have two answers. You know, what I
Okay.
mean, when I first got sober, you know, what I mean, it was a lot of busting through my pride and my ego and,
Mm.
you know, all those different things of prejudices and misunderstandings. You know, what I mean, there was a lot of me I had to get through. You know what I mean,
Sure.
to be able to surrender. And then later on in my career, whenever it came time to seek mental, emotional help. What was going on with me at that time was a lot of confusion. So I was already sober, right? I knew how to get help and to get sober. Like, hey, you have to talk about it. You have to be honest. You have to be willing. You know, so I had all of those things in practice. And for me, and because I had, you know, traumatic brain injury going on, my executive functioning was not working where it should be. So I'm not making the greatest of decisions anyway. So it kept me in this loop of, like what you said, how could I go from basically jumping tall buildings in a single bound, you know what I mean, to now I'm the guy that I can't figure out which t-shirt to wear, you know what I mean, or I
Right.
wander around a hospital looking to get room 105. You know what I'm saying? Like these simple, or I'm trying to fill out a receipt from dinner and add the tip, you know what I mean, to the total, you know, to pay the waitress. And I can't figure those things out. So for me, it was a lot of confusion. And, you know what I mean? Like what
Yeah.
happened? Like what happened? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, wow, what happened? And like I said, not that I was resistant to it, but I was just caught in this loop of what happened. But again, lucky for me, and my willingness, you know, I mean, I had a few buddies, other warriors in my life that were my peers that I was completely honest with, you know, and they would say like, Tom, hey, this is what you need to do because you know you've experienced in the fellowship, man. Like we have to have each other, right? Some people might be able to do it on their own. Like I'm not one of them. Like I require usually about a team of guys, you know what I mean,
Yes.
and gals, not just one or two. But I had this, you know, buddy of mine, man. He just didn't let up. He's like, man, you have got to go get help because my answers was like, man, I'm not anything special. Like everybody that I've known has been blown up. You know what I mean? Everybody that I've known have experienced what I've experienced, you know. So but eventually it got through to that loop I was in of confusion, you know, and I was just like, you know, it was a pretty downward spiral, even though I was going to meetings, talking to my sponsor, doing step work, like all of my tools in the tool belt, you know, that all was working fine. I was alive and I was sober, but I needed this other professional help, just like in the big book, it talks about seeking out doctors, you know, and experts. And so that's what got me to help again was someone that cared about me, pushing me in that direction. I'd like to tell you that, oh, one day I decided that, man, this is really a problem and I need to do something about it. You know, no, I'm that idiot. You know what I mean? I'm the hard head. I'm the guy that, well, just keep going, man. It'll get better. Just keep doing what you're doing, you know, and, but yet again, I needed that same reinforcement, you know, I mean, of my peers and my loved ones and my family, you know, to say that's why a lot of guys don't make it. Man, I barely made it. I barely made that transition. It was really, really hard. And I had professional help and I had all this love and support of my family. Like I and I barely made it, right? So now you remove family members, you remove support, you remove therapies. There's no way to make it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And the only out is because when I was in that space, you know, it feels like I'm alone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It thinks like I'm alone. You know what I mean? Like no one is feeling the way I'm feeling. No one is as screwed up as I am. No, you know what I mean? All of that just awfulness, you know, and that's the ones that don't make it, you know. I mean, that's where I would have been, but I was fortunate enough to have all these people in my life. That's why what you guys are doing is absolutely so amazing.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I mean, yeah, to be honest with you, is kind of looking at you and what you and the fine people at Warriors Heart Found, do, and as a good model. But I want to touch real quick on ego, maybe to help people understand. We do get a lot of loved ones that are watching, not just those in recovery. Again, we are parents and addicts in need, so a lot of that
Right.
support is a huge part of what we do and what we provide to maybe help them understand. I would think you go into a combat situation, or you're a law enforcement officer, EMT, firefighter. There has to be a sense of ego. It's
Uh-huh.
to help you
Yes.
survive, thrive. But maybe what, if any, worked for you to kind of shift that ego to something else? Because again, it's you you were in so many combat situations that it was
Yeah.
constant fight or flight mode,
Right.
and survival. And it's that's my biggest concern that I see is how do we help pull them away? One of our goals is providing these sober living houses in a good neighborhood where we are at, that they are not prone to, if they walk out their front door, there's that dealer
Right.
again. Trying to pull them out of it and realize that safety has shifted to something else, that they don't
Mhm.
have to be in that ego to continue to protect themselves.
Yeah, man. It goes back to like basically Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
when you're in that survival state, you know what I mean? It is fight, flight, kill, be killed, starve, you know what I mean? That when you're just living to survive, there's no way to come up from move up the scale with that, right? And for me or for anyone else. So in order for us to get like to that next space, somebody's got to be able to provide that for us if we can't do it ourselves, right?
Mm.
So like using y'all as an example, what you're doing, like you said, and now you're creating this new space where you do have food, water, and shelter. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So now we can move on to the next problem. Well, what's the next problem? You know, well, maybe it's my mental health. You know what I mean? Maybe it's my self-medication. Yeah, you know what I mean? So that way, but when you're in that survival mode just to exist, man, wow,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? There's that's where you're at, you know, and but once you keep moving up the chain, you know, and like you said with the ego and stuff, when you're out of that survival mode, it's like, I don't need this and need that, you know, for me, I mean, unfortunate for me or fortunate, you know, I learned the hard way. You know, I tried to do it on my own. I tried to figure it out. I tried it, man, and I failed, miserably failed. You know, so therefore, I was beat into a submission of like, man, I really need to seek some assistance here. You know, so but to get through that ego, like we were talking about, I mean, life had to beat me into submission for that one, you know, and me, you know, doing it. But guys, and then it's that level of maturity, you know,
Right.
even if we're not talking about these mental, emotional, you know, kind of things, you know, just as you mature in life, you learn that you can learn from others, you know what I mean, and don't have to be a knucklehead and, you know, learn the hard way each time. So I would just recommend to folks that maybe even if you're not having problems in these professions, you know, but hey, get ahead of it. I mean, it's just the intelligent thing to do, you know, and that's what I always relate back to the job is like, man, if I wasn't performing at a level, whether that was physical or shooting or cognition, whatever it was, well, I sought additional training. You know what I mean? I sought additional help. You know what I mean? I didn't figure it out on my own. I went to an expert, you know, and said like, hey, you know, teach, you know, get me up to speed on whatever it I need. And the cool thing is I can do the same thing when it comes to self-medication, mental health, emotional health, spiritual health. I just need that advisor, that mentor, that sponsor, whatever you want to label that thing is that hey, I need someone or something to get me from where I'm at, which I've identified as not great, to where I want to go. You know, and I don't know. I wish I had a words of wisdom to help people with their ego, but like I said, the only way I learned was the hard way, and
Yeah.
I hope that no one has to learn as hard as I did, but now you know how we do.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I definitely had I didn't even realize that I had an ego and how fragile it was until really getting about 8 months into recovery. That is for sure. I do want to touch on everything that you're doing at Warrior's Heart. And if you wouldn't mind, and
Sure.
this is not a knock on the VA at all, and the reason I
No.
bring this up is to hopefully help the loved ones of those that are struggling understand. We've done some work with the VA, providing them
Yeah.
Narcan and some other different things here locally. Just how overworked that system can be in those
Yes.
fine folks, and they are doing their best, but they are also limited
Absolutely.
by budgets and everything else. So if you could speak to how important for the family to understand that, that support to your loved one, even when they're pushing all your buttons
Ooh.
or breaking your heart or worrying, how
Yeah.
important it is, and that change really can happen. I mean, you're an example, and you've had, I forget the thousands that have now come through Warrior's Heart that have turned their lives around too.
Yeah. Yeah,
If
man,
you,
we've had now April will make 9 years that we've been licensed and open for business. We've had almost 3,300 warriors come in. And so we have our Texas facility, which has been, in existence for that long, and we have a facility in Virginia that's been open for a year and a half. And like you said, with the VA, and we're in network and in contract with the VA. So if, you run into, like you mentioned, the family members, if you have those loved ones, that are willing to get help, because as we know, a key piece of getting help is you got to be willing, to try, but if they're willing, I mean, we have several from all over the nation. We have folks coming, through the VA process to get a VA referral and authorization to come to Warriors Heart because we are in their community care network. So,
Mm,
so we have, like, as you're doing that, like you said, with the folks that are involved with the VA, and totally agree. There's so many wonderful human beings in the VA, man. It's just a system that is absolutely overwhelmed, and so that's what we try to do in coordination with them, to be an asset for the VA. If they in their systems, if they can't, fulfill what the veteran needs, that we're an asset that's available to them. So we have several that come through that way. But yeah, but that's what, like I said, 9 years and 3,300 warriors, coming through, and it's a, minimum 42-day inpatient treatment facility, and we love what we do, and we're the opposite of anything that anyone's ever really experienced if they've been to rehab, especially in the veteran population stuff. So yeah,
yeah.
man, we love it.
Yeah. What are I know you folks do so many amazing different things there. I mean, I've seen at Warriors Heart, uh, taking individuals that are there in your care and maybe providing, gosh, I'm trying to remember when it was something where somebody came and taught them music and they actually helped
Yeah.
write a song. And there's
Yes.
so
Yes.
many amazing things you're doing there.
Yeah, that was and what you're referring to is a organization called Operation Song, where they pair songwriters with veterans or first responders. So they'll come to our sober living facility that we have here in Texas, and just like you said, part of what they do is they pair up, a veteran or first responder with a songwriter, like a legit songwriter, and all day long, they put together a song, and the songwriter says to the veteran, or first responder, like, hey, what story do you want to tell? And so they just sat down, and by the end of the night, we have a little concert, after all day they've been writing, and the singer-songwriter, with the veteran or first responder, they get up and we do a little concert, man, and they sing the song that they wrote. It's absolutely amazing. It's so cathartic. It's so natural, you know what I mean? Song and music and lyrics and a good story. It makes for a good song, So that's one of the aspects that we do our sober living and our partial hospitalization folks. And then, but yeah, and then in the inpatient side, I mean, we do the heavy clinical work where they get a licensed chemical dependency counselor and a trauma counselor, and they get 4 clinical episodes, you know what I mean, one-on-ones, during the week or small caseload groups, and then, we do all that emotional and heavy duty work, which we all love to avoid, right? Because who wants to do that? But it's super necessary. So we do that, but then we have to have that balance. And the balance that we have is our art program, our metal shop, our wood shop, our canine, fishing, jujitsu, all those different things. So it's that good balance of, deep, hard work emotionally and mentally and, but also balance it out with constructive, creative. Back to the body keeps the score. We have to heal mind, body, spirit. We're a whole person, you can't I just can't work on one piece of me, it's going to fail. I'm made up of my mind and my body and my spirit, so I have to address each one of those things. And that's what we do here.
Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely just amazing. And I wish that I had some magic thing for us to be able to expand all this into every state. And
me too.
And Linda help that is there, but I do want people to know that there is the help, and please don't hesitate to reach out to us. And I do have the information for Warrior's Heart in the podcast description here. So
awesome.
if you do have a loved one that is, a first responder veteran and they are struggling, please, at least just like us, Tom, I know that if you can't directly help someone, you and your team, they will find the help.
Absolutely. You call, you get, warriorsheart.com, you get that number on there, and you talk to our admissions advocate. And who they're advocating for is who's on the phone. To your point, like obviously, if you're a fit, we want you in the Warriors Heart, but if that doesn't work, then we will advocate for you to get whatever it is that you need. So absolutely, same as you. We're in the same, we are aligned. Yes. We just want people to get the help that they need.
Yes, sir. Tom, if you could close us up with any just words of love and encouragement, something that you might want to lend not only to those that are struggling, but their loved ones as well.
Yeah, man. It's not, it sounds cliche, but it's not, man. And that is that you're not alone. You are not alone. It feels like you're alone. It thinks like you're alone. But you're absolutely not. There's loads of people that are just waiting to grab your hand and help you out because somebody grabbed my hand and helped me out, and so just know that you're not alone. And for the family members that are out there with the ones that are suffering, to the best of your ability, don't give up, keep the faith, keep working, don't accept it until they're better. And that's, and the other big thing of the message, man, is grace. You know what I mean? And that's what it's all about. Because if you're suffering also, you may be thinking, I don't deserve to get better. Well, you might not. But there's this stuff called grace, man. And it's, and that means undeserved kindness. And there's plenty of kind human beings that are willing to help me if I'm willing to reach out, so yeah.
Yes, Tom, thank you so much for your time. It's an absolute pleasure to speak with you again.
Man, you too, always.
Thank you for listening to Pains Don't Hide the Scars podcast or watching on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@PainNonprofit.